I want you to pull three things there. I want you to pull on the right side of this booklet what my family should know. On the insert, you pull this No Estate Plan Costs Your Heirs. And on the left side, pull out the Comprehensive Estate Planning Guide. The Comprehensive Estate Planning Guide. Okay? Y'all with me on that? Okay, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am an attorney, of course, and I do everything from Medicaid planning to advanced tax planning. If you care to hear a full presentation on estate planning next Tuesday, just call my secretary. She'll get you signed up. I'm doing a full presentation next Tuesday morning, then doing an advanced succession tax planning next Tuesday evening. You can just call and talk to Barbara. She'll get you straight. I grew up on a tobacco farm in Southern Virginia. I always like to know people's backgrounds. We grew up in a house with no indoor plumbing. We had a pump well out back in a Johnny house, and we had no indoor plumbing till after I graduated from high school. I'll tell you some interesting stories sometimes. Then I went off to UVA, graduated undergrad and law school here. Then I went and got a master's in tax from Marshall Wythe School of Law because I really got into doing a lot of tax planning and enjoyed it. And a lot of the teachers then, or professors then at Marshall Wythe were attorneys that I was working with and seeing every day. And they were teaching the course. For the last 2 years, just an FYI, I went with a church group and a medical mission team to Kenya, Africa for the last 2 years. We're scheduled to go next year. We took about 30, 35 doctors and nurses and pharmacists. Also took a church group, got into the prisons, and did all schools and everything you can think of. And I'm convinced my tobacco years of being on the farm without an indoor plumbing got me ready for going to Kenya, Africa. I promise you, if you've never been there. But and right now I'm helping a local Kenya pastor, a good friend of mine. They've started a church for African immigrants, and they're the poorest of the poor. And they're running about 50 on Sunday morning, so I'm really excited about that. But if you look at the Comprehensive Estate Planning Guide, and I also want to give a note to my mother. My mother was the greatest influence on my life. We grew up in the South, and my mother had compassion, and she was totally colorblind, and that really impacted my life. When you look at the Comprehensive Estate Planning Guide, when you go in to see an attorney of your choice, whether it's me or someone else, this is a very important document because this document helps the attorney identify all the players. For example, if you come in and you have stepchildren, we've got to provide for that because if you don't name those stepchildren, they don't take. Also, you need to know all your assets. Yes, I need to know if you have assets in Canada or assets, had some people with property in Belgium and people with property in Iran, and you got to know all that in order to properly address the transfer of assets. You need to know the values too. I need to know if your estate's worth $500,000, if it's worth $1 million. I need to know that because there are a lot of different tax options I need to let you know about. So this form is very, very important. If you die today, if your spouse has children by a prior marriage and your spouse dies without a will, you just get a third. Those kids take 2/3. So you got to know what you don't know, and you got to be told that. This booklet, I don't care if you take this booklet and wrap your name around it and just take mine off. This is a very handy booklet. I love it. Been using it for years. It's got everything in it your clients, people you run into, need to provide to their family. They need to know where things are. The tax example you see in the middle of is actually an example of some clients I'm working with now. This is a worst case scenario. Next Tuesday evening, I'm going to share how we're getting this. If you look down at case number 1, 2, and 3 on the tax consequences, next week I'm going to show how we are taking this family and we're getting it to a zero tax. We're really close to it. Where case 1, case 2, and case 3 will be wiped out. There's a case 4, and I'll show you that next Tuesday night where I'm speaking if you care to come and listen. Now, the one thing we do is we want to make sure that the documents are user-friendly. For example, look in your powers of attorney. If your powers of attorney says, my agent can only gift the federal tax exclusion amount per year of $13,000, you ought to throw that out. You don't limit that. On a Friday afternoon a few years ago, we had to transfer, while a lady was in a coma, had to transfer and move around over $1 million in assets. because in 3 hours' time, from 2 to 5 o'clock, if we had that cute little provision in there, because the attorneys want you to know, they know what the gift tax exclusion is, that you can only give $13,000 a year, we would have been toast. And we moved it around, saved the estate about $350,000 to $400,000. The surviving spouse, because this lady never came out of the coma, and the children were very happy with that. You don't want those restrictions in there. In your advanced medical directives, I've given seminars with Martha Jefferson's people on this. In your advanced medical directives, a lot of people like to say, well, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this done. Suppose just before you slip into a coma, going into the operating room, you change your mind. Too late. That document can't be changed because it's too late. So mine is wide open with this caveat. It's subject to my last known verbal commands to my agent, my wife or my other agents. Look at your powers of attorney, your wills and everything. How many backups do you have? I have 5 in my documents. A lot of people will only appoint each other. I see so many attorneys, they have the husband appoint the wife, no backups. Wife appoint the husband, no backups. And sometimes both of you are going to be the last one ringing the bell, okay? So you need backups. People will say, well, I don't want to choose children who are in Hawaii. Why? Everything's done on the computer now. So choose your backups. Choose people you trust. Speaking of trust, in my trust documents, we have a provision in there that allows an independent party to fire the trustee. Yes, we fired children in a nice way so they didn't know they were getting fired. We had one child that loved her sister, out of 5 siblings most, and this sister who had never had a successful business venture in her life, although she tried 15 to 20 of them, she finally came up with the business venture that was going to make her wealthy, and she told the sister, the trustee, and the sister, the trustee, said, that's a great idea, although you failed 15 times already. And the sister started advancing her money that belonged to the other siblings. One of the siblings from Europe called me, said, what can we do? I said, I can fire her, but let's do it a nice way. And so we went in, had a meeting, had him on the phone. We said, you know, sister trustee who's giving away all this money, you're in a lot of stress, and your brother's willing now to step in if you'd like for him to take over for a while. She signed the paper and said, oh, I'm glad my brother wants to do that. The sister that had the business that incidentally went defunct didn't get any more money. We cut off that flow. So you got to have those, it's got to be user-friendly documents. That the most important thing is my clients, the mom and dad, when they tell me this is what I want done and these kids I'm worried about, I listen to them and I'm going to provide all kinds of proper protection. Assets have got to be properly titled. Medicaid planning, I see a lot of that. I'll have children coming in your age, and I'll start talking about their parents. You got a parent that's 70 years old, you're the only child, you're a perfect child, you walk on water. The parent, you have no credit problems, the parent has a total asset base of about $200,000, $300,000, I'm thinking Medicaid. And I'll suggest that with you. Now, all of these documents and these things to be in place, you really need to have and spend time getting things ready before you go into the attorney's office. For example, I never do an hour interview to get this information from my clients. I send it to them ahead of time, they fill it out, and we jump past the first hour. But I enjoy planning. If you have any missionaries, I do all their documents for free. If you have any pastors, I'll help them out, but if they drive up to my office in a Cadillac or a Mercedes, I'm not giving them any cuts. Handicapped people, I help them out. I had a little old lady named Helen, and I'm closing. A little lady named Helen, she's blind. She's on dialysis, 3 times a week. She came in, and the lady that brought her said, you've got to charge her something unless she's going to be upset with you. I said, well, tell me how much should I charge you? So I did all of her documents. Said $50. I said, okay, $50. So I charged her $50. She paid me cash. I had my secretary give a receipt. She said, well, I want to hug you. Now, Miss Helen's a trip. She always wears a hat. She's old-fashioned. She's a little short lady. She went to hug me, and this is what she said. Boy, you're fat. I said, Miss Helen, that's another $50 from you for doing that. But Miss Helen and I are great friends. But I love what I do. I enjoy it greatly. And life's about helping other people get through it easier. And I agree. And as far as hospice, you guys are great. We're done. You're great. My mother-in-law, I agree in keeping people at home. My mother-in-law stayed with us with hospice until the day she passed away. And we would not let her go to a nursing home, although I'm not against that. We kept her right there. In fact, we put the medical bed in our living room so she would have all of us around her at all times. And anyway, well, thank y'all very much.